course, is Stinchfield, the podcast. It is so great to be along with you today. Stinchfield, the podcast here. I'm Grant Stinchfield. And listen, we have big news. RFK Jr. is living up to his promises. What RFK Jr. is doing, getting rid of the 17 committee members that is in charge of vaccine approvals, talking about bias amongst there, really conflict of interest. In many cases, he spells out one case of a gentleman who owned the patent to a vaccine that he was charged with approving. How in the world is that guy on the committee? RFK Jr. talked about that on Fox News. And then we had some testimony from a lawyer who makes his living basically exposing the vaccine companies and Big Pharma for not acting in the public's best interest. We're going to go through his testimony to Congress today. I think it's eye-opening when you start to listen to all of this play out and how it plays out. I think you're going to be surprised about how these vaccines actually get to market and why it's so important that RFK Jr. continue the work that he's doing at Health and Human Services. With that, folks, I want to tell you about my friends over at the Wellness Company. They're the sponsor of today's podcast. This is the emergency medical prescription drug kit that I want everyone to have. If you don't have one of these, you are not prepared for an emergency. Yes, I'm sure you have a first aid kit, but do you have prescription medications in here? Things like ivermectin, things like amoxicillin, things like a Z-Pak. Some of the most common antibiotics, antivirals, antiparasitics on the market. They're going to help keep you and your family safe during times of chaos, whether it's a natural disaster, God forbid, a terrorist attack, maybe a cyber attack, and the drugstores are closed down. We've seen that happen. You need one of these on hand. And don't forget the parasite cleanse. I have started it. I think this is imperative for most Americans are infected with parasites. When you look at the research on this, quite stunning, frankly, and disgusting. So again, they have a great parasite cleanse, sold out 3 times, back in stock. TWC.health/Grant. That's TWC.health/Grant. Get with them today and make that happen. All right. With that, folks, let's get the show started.
Uncensored and unapologetic. This is Stinchfield. Here's your host, Grant Stinchfield.
Well, hi there, everybody. My guest today, Dr. Alejandro Diaz. He is a fellow Texan down there in, where, El Paso area, Doc?
El Paso. Yes, Grant. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I say just down the road, but it's quite a ways from El Paso to Dallas, but still fellow Texans. It's great to have you on the program. First off, let me just ask you, RFK Jr. making some big moves, firing these 17 committee members for the vaccine approval process. What do you make of this?
I think it was an amazing move, very intelligent, very brave, and he is committed to his promises of campaign, and obviously echoing President Trump that they just want to make America healthy again. And so I think that it was an amazing move. You know, they invite people to move out and step out from different conflict of interest and bring fresh and new people. And I would like to point out that probably the most, to highlight somebody like Dr. Robert Malone. He was one of the creators of the mRNA technology. So Dr. Malone is one of the highlights of those new 8 members. And obviously, I think Secretary Kennedy will invite more members, because I think they have to have like 17 or 20. So I think it was a great move.
You know, he made a point to say he's not going to bring in hyper anti-vaxxers. I'm not sure the left is going to believe him that they aren't anti-vaxxers, but I think it is important that we don't have just hyper anti-vax crowd, only those that are anti-vax because the vaccine isn't good crowd.
Grant, I really think that we have to make a distinction of an anti-vaxxer person or a conscience vaccine person, which is, there are two different things. One is I believe in the vaccines. The other is I understand the vaccines, And another different thing is that I have researched the vaccines. They're complete different arenas. So people who has research about vaccines, they are the most knowledgeable people about these compounds and these products. And it's a huge difference. So it's important to make that distinction.
You're a pediatrician, so you specialize in children's health. We went from, I think at one point it was like 3 vaccines close to when I was a child. I'm 56 years old today. Now, to depending on your doctor, it could be anywhere between 60 and 92 vaccines. Do you recommend any vaccines for the kids coming through your practice?
Grant, let me tell you something. I'm a pediatric allergist, immunologist, vaccinologist. I was involved in a probably one of the largest programs when it comes to vaccine in the world, and I'm talking about immigration medicine. And so I learned a lot. When you and I were growing up during the 70s, there were from 3 to 6 vaccines only. Now up to 90 vaccines. If we see the statistics of only one disease, and I'm talking about autism, when we were growing up back in the 70s, I bet you don't remember any of your friends, any of your classmates with autism. I don't remember anybody. Now you ask an average kid, and they not only know, they know them by name. So we went from one with every 10,000 patients with autism back in our days, and now 35 for every 1,000. So it's what is the common denominator? Definitely vaccines.
So, so are there any vaccines we should be giving our kids, in your opinion?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say that because I don't want to make a medical opinion. But let me put my example. I have 4 kids, and I do not vaccinate my kids because I know about vaccines. I understand what vaccines are, and as you can see on my X account, I am not anti-vaxxer. Only a few of them are good. That's what I state on my X account, and I do believe that.
All right. So I went a few years ago to Nicaragua. They have a series of diseases that we really don't have too much of here in the United States. I got a whole slew of vaccines. Now, this was before COVID. I didn't want to get malaria or whatever it is in Nicaragua. Was I wrong to do that?
No, well, when you are traveling to high burden infectious disease places, probably you can do that. But everything comes to the immune system, your nutrition system. If you're well nourished, you're in a good immune system. Your immune system it's good, and you're healthy. Chances of getting any disease are very slim. So it's when it gets complicated, to talk about vaccines, because at the end of the day, everything it's about health, about your immune system. What are you eating, and what are people eating, and the quality and the quantity, and all these things about food that just make your immune system stronger.
You only have to look at this. Is when I knew, Doc, that the COVID-19 virus was not as dangerous as everyone was making it out to be, even at the height when we were being told all these people were dying. The New York Times had run a full page of pictures of the victims, and it reminded me like they did after 9/11 when they had put the 9/11 victims in the paper. And I'm looking at this, and every single one of the victims was obese, was overweight, every single one. So it instantly told me that this isn't just a coincidence that they're all overweight, that healthy people are not dying from this. And so, that's my philosophy, which is why I'm glad you bring that up, the importance of good health. I really do find it very, very important. And I know the Wellness Company has a series of supplements, not just the prescription medications, that can keep you healthy, folks. twc.health/voice. I wanted to play some of the opening testimony from a gentleman named Aaron Siri. He's a lawyer. He has one of the largest practices that goes after the pharmaceutical companies for vaccine injury. But it's interesting. I don't know how this works because the vaccines all have immunity. Is that right? Like, you're not allowed to sue the vaccine companies, which is the only thing I know that exists for, that you can't sue, which makes no sense. Let me play a little bit of him, Doc, and then I want to get your opinion of what he's saying as we go through this, if that's okay. All right, here we go.
Yeah, our vaccine practice, I believe, which has over 40 professionals, it doesn't represent pharmaceutical companies, I believe is the largest vaccine practice in the world. When we litigate vaccine cases, we cannot rely on credentials or fancy titles. We have to prove our claims with high-impact data and sources. For example, I saw a slide put up that showed 3 million lives were saved from COVID-19 vaccines. The citation to it was to the Commonwealth Fund. If you follow that, that's not a peer-reviewed study. That's a blog. It's a blog that used a mathematical model to calculate that 3 million lives were saved. So I agree with the Senator Blumenthal who said, quote, claims made, I think you meant regarding vaccines, we need to examine the evidence. And that's an example of that. We need to look carefully at the evidence we are relying upon when we are making claims about vaccines. I don't think that if I went into court and I was relying on a blog that used a mathematical model, I would be laughed out of court if I was making those claims about vaccines. But unfortunately, when it comes to promoting vaccines, well, that's what we often see. The underlying data is not typically really carefully evaluated. Claims about what vaccines do when they're positive, because our health agencies are responsible for promoting them, easily made. Claims that vaccines cause any harms or injuries often get ignored, no matter how good.
So he says this statistic, Doc, 3 million people died of COVID. I hear that number all the time. Turns out the senator, where he gets that stat, it's from a blog.
Unfortunately, many members that are making huge decisions at the public health state, they are not getting professional advice. This is why I am talking all the time about biopolitics. Biopolitics is basically experts on health that they advise, legislators so they can legislate with evidence-based medicine when it comes to legislation, and then will impact public health. So it's important to have advisors at the highest quality, at the highest levels. Like, for example, that hearing with Aaron Siri, my good friend Dr. Peter McCullough, my good friend Dr. Jim Thorpe, and obviously an amazing Senator Ron Johnson. It was an eye-opening for everybody. That was an amazing hearing because they kind of put all the evidence right there for people to make decisions. At the end of the day, is that people, they have to make decisions based on professional and scientists that understand exactly what they are doing.
So I actually believe, Doc, that this is not ignorance or doing it wrong on behalf of what turns out to be typically Democrats when it comes to these things. This is by design. They don't go seek the advice of professionals because they don't want to know. That would get in the way of lining the pockets of their friends in Big Pharma.
Unfortunately, Grant, that is true. And as you know, I've been traveling the world, speaking at most of the largest senates in the world, like Tokyo, Romania, the European Parliament, Mexico, everywhere, talking about biopolitics, bringing experts like the doctors we have at the Wellness Company and other folks, other amazing doctors and scientists to coach legislators to bring the best of healthcare, the best of public health for the people. I think that agenda is amazing, and we have to push that agenda for the betterment of society.
I agree with you, and I think there are those who want that agenda that are in office and those that don't. And, I blame a lot of Democrats, but there's some Republicans on this side as well, too, that are beholden to Big Pharma. All right, let me play some more of Aaron Siri. This is his opening his statement.
Underlying data. I also heard that deaths sharply declined in 2021. Well, when you look at all-cause mortality in the United States, deaths in 2021 went up compared to 2020, and presumably most of the most frail, the weak among us died in 2020 from COVID. We should have had a reduction in all-cause mortality in the United States. We did not. And those numbers you can't argue with. They're binary. You're either dead or you're alive. You can argue whether the vaccine killed you or didn't kill you, whether COVID killed you or didn't kill you. But it can't argue with all-cause mortality. And we did not have a reduction in all-cause mortality in 2021. We had an increase. And we really need to answer that question. We have sent many letters to our federal health officials trying to get an answer to that. With that.
All right, so what he's saying is those who love the COVID vaccine will say that we had a decrease in COVID deaths in 2021, and look at the amount of COVID deaths that went down. But overall deaths went up. So maybe fewer people died of, quote, COVID, but more people in America died overall than the previous year. Something was causing that to happen. And I think he raised a good point. You can argue whether or not it's the vaccine. You could argue whether it was COVID. I don't know. I could even make an argument if I wanted to. I could probably go find statistics to say, you know what, the people that had COVID, maybe there was something, lingering effects. You could bring up all kinds of things, but you can't argue that more people died. But they don't want to ever tell you that statistic, do they?
I really think that Mr. Siri, he made a very good point, and the all-cause mortality it was not affected by the rollout of the so-called vaccines that, as you know, I never call them vaccines because they are not vaccines. Vaccines is a very specific product to prevent disease. That's a vaccine. That's pretty much the definition of a vaccine. And these products, they were just, toxic injectable products of experimentation. And, since the beginning of the COVID operation, as you know, Grant, I never call it pandemic. It was not a pandemic. It was a COVID operation. There is a very specific and a very interesting paper by a Canadian scientist, Denis Roncaut, and he proved that after the rollout of the so-called vaccines, COVID vaccines, around 17 million people have died worldwide. So imagine, and their estimations of the people that unfortunately died worldwide with the COVID, for the COVID, the virus itself, it was approximately 6 million. So 6 million from the virus and 17 million worldwide after the rollout of the vaccine. So everybody, they can make their own conclusions.
You would think, and I think maybe Aaron Siri makes this point here, you would think that after going through COVID and you had the most frail, comorbidity loaded up people that died, that you would have already died. So you wouldn't have had an increase in deaths because you would have already kind of, I know it's hard as it sounds, but you would already have weeded out some of the more frail population. Instead, deaths go up. Let me play some more of him. I think this is where he makes that point.
Said, not only do we need to carefully study the data and science before we go and litigate our vaccine cases, because again, I don't have a MD or a PhD or an MPH. We also need to understand the economic and regulatory framework around vaccines. And COVID-19 vaccines did not just fall into a vacuum. They fell into a very well-developed regulatory and economic framework for vaccines that has developed over the last 40 years. For every product on the market, you can sue the manufacturer for harm, for design defect claims, meaning the claim that the product could have made safer. I mean, literally, look around this room, planes, cars, pharmaceutical drugs, every one. There's only one product in America. You cannot sue the manufacturer for design defect claim to claim that it could have been made safer, and that are vaccines. I heard, injections, vaccines. My definition of vaccine is any product for which the government needs to give it immunity from harms. To me, that's what a vaccine is, because some prevent infection, some don't. That's what a vaccine is, meaning it can't survive without that immunity, apparently. Why did vaccines get this immunity, which was provided in 1986 under the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act? Because leading up to 86, there were only 3 routine childhood vaccines, MMR, OPV, and DTP, and they were causing so much harm and causing so much liability that all the manufacturers were going out of business to stop making them. And Congress, instead of forcing those manufacturers to do what every other product manufacturer needs to do in that situation, which is what? Make a better, safer product. Instead said, you know what? We're just going to give you immunity. We're going to make it so nobody can sue you for those harms. And you can keep selling your product to the American public no matter how many children it kills or injures.
You know what's amazing is from a free market perspective, and I'm a big free marketeer, Doc, I would offer up, and Milton Friedman could even make an argument. Milton Friedman, another great free marketeer, one of the greatest minds I think that ever talked about things like this, was that you wouldn't even need an FDA if you were able to sue the drug manufacturers, that the free markets would take care of this. Now, yes, you may have some people that are harmed in the process, but once people started learning people were dying taking the drugs, the free market's going to say, we're not taking the drugs anymore. But that's not allowed to happen now because, one, transparency was all but non-existent for this, and I think most other vaccines as well. And then you can't sue the manufacturer? Well, how are you supposed to have any recourse if they were actively out there and didn't do what they should have done before putting it on the market?
Exactly. And what he's referring to, the 1986 kind of immune act for vaccines, that changed the whole landscape of vaccines. And if we think about it, I'm a doctor. I've been doing this for over 30 plus years. And when I went to medical school, I don't recall those very autoimmune and very hard type of diseases back in the day. So now, you can look at the ads, you can look at the even social media, all this complex disease like Crohn's disease and autoimmune diseases and lupus and things like that, very complex. They spiked after the increase of vaccines. And everybody, any scientist, they know that. We know that. And unfortunately, we are loaded with new diseases, complex diseases. They need to be treated with complex medications. And, we are on a sick care paradigm, not a health care.
Yeah, that to me is the biggest tragedy of all, is that we're on a sick care paradigm, not a healthcare paradigm. What a quote, Doc. Before I get back to you and Aaron Siri, I want to tell people about the wellness company that has doctors just like Dr. Diaz, who will tell you the truth, straight shooters, with products that are going to help keep you safe. This, folks, is, I will tell you flat out, it's my favorite product because I am, as Dr. McCullough says, he calls me a prepper. I'm not a prepper that would make preppers proud, but it would probably make your neighbor proud. I'm prepared for most things. I've got ammunition, thousands of rounds. I've got food and water and those kinds of things. But I also have my prescription medical kit. Not only do I have this one, but I've got this one too. So I'm ready. This is the field kit. It's in a waterproof case, one of those Pelican cases. There's steroids in here. There's all of the prescription medications like you have in the other kits, plus more. I think the most important thing that comes in this kit, you get an EpiPen. And if you have kids or have kids whose friends come over that you don't know if they're allergic to bee stings or things like that, having an EpiPen on hand at your house could literally save a life. So you get that with this field kit here. twc.health/Grant. Use the promo code GRANT for 10% off. All the kits come with a guidebook. They're going to tell you exactly how to use it. But I'm telling you, folks, if you pride yourself on keeping you and your family safe and ready for anything, you need to have one of these kits on hand. At a minimum, this one. At a maximum, as many as you can get. twc.health/Grant. twc.health/Grant. Use that promo code GRANT. All right, Doc, let's continue playing Aaron Siri here because I just find his opening statement fascinating.
And the issue is that immunity was not just given for those three products. It was given for any childhood vaccine, routine child vaccine that was developed thereafter. I tell you this not to take issue with childhood vaccines, but to explain to you the regulatory framework in which vaccines have developed over the last 40 years. We have now gone from 3 injections in the first year of life under the CDC schedule in 86 to 29 injections, including in utero, if a child follows the CDC schedule today. Every one of those vaccines, save one, was developed by a pharmaceutical company knowing they would not be responsible for the injuries that are caused by those products. So when you have drug trials where pharmaceutical companies, they care about losing money, they don't want to lose money on their drugs, they often do multi-year placebo-controlled trials before they get on the market because they don't want to end up upside down. They're there to make money. But with vaccine products, because they don't have that financial incentive, they have the disincentive. Almost every childhood vaccine in this country is licensed based on clinical trials with no placebo control, save for COVID-19 vaccine, often days or weeks, up to maybe 6 months of safety review after injection, and are often extremely underpowered. Those trials could never have really confirmed the safety of this product, and my submission to this committee laid out every single vaccine and put them in detail.
All right, so what he's basically saying, I guess in layman's terms, Doc, you probably do a better job than I do, but that there's no real tests when you talk about placebos and comparing it to someone who did have the vaccine or someone who didn't have the vaccine. They're just throwing it at the market. Is that the oversimplification?
Oh yeah, yeah. And what Mr. Siri is referring to is that the gold standard for any very good scientific investigation, obviously, it's a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial. That's the highest in investigation and research you can get. And I am very, very confident that with an amazing leadership of Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in the MAHA agenda, I really think with the new members that he brought to the Advisory Committee for Immunization Practices, ACIP, I really think that they will start making those double-blind, placebo-controlled trials, and people, they will appreciate that because they promise that. And I think that's going to be amazing. The other thing, interesting, Grant, that Secretary Kennedy is doing is the Stork Speed initiative, that they're going to look at the ingredients, including heavy metals, other contaminants, and the nutrition of baby formula. That's going to be an amazing thing for everybody in the future generations.
It's amazing. The greatest nation in the world, the United States,
Number one,
doesn't have the same standards that many other Western nations have when it comes to baby formula, of all things. But before I move on this, a double-blind placebo study. Can you tell me what that means and why that's important?
Interesting. So basically, this is the short version, okay, because it gets complicated, very technical. So double-blind placebo-controlled trial is that you are making a research study where the investigator, the research, and the patient, they don't know who is receiving the medication itself, the placebo, and no one knows until the end of the research. At the end of the research, you're gonna be taking all the notes and all the statistics of what happened during the research, and then at the end you open both boxes and you will know which population were receiving the real medication and which population they were receiving placebo.
All right, so the double-blind, the patient doesn't know and the researcher doesn't know. I guess that's where double comes in. The blind, I guess, is to take away any bias from the researcher. If you're a pharmaceutical company researcher, you want it to be safe. You could let your bias get in the way. There's no way for that to happen if you don't know who had it and who didn't. Is that it?
Yeah, control is that everything gets controlled during the process. So everything it's under control all the time. There are a lot of people observing this, a lot of people taking care of this. And so there, at the end of the day, there's no bias, bias. It is what it is at the end. It worked, it didn't work. It had side effects, it didn't have.
And we're not doing that now for vaccines?
Oh, no. Of course not.
Unbelievable. All right, let me let him finish up. I know you're busy. I got to let you go here in a minute, but I'm gonna let him finish here.
I will. Since I'm running out of time, I'll just wrap up by saying this. You might say, well, okay, the pharmaceutical companies did that, but why would the FDA allow it? It's because, unfortunately, our federal health authorities are hopelessly conflicted. Congress gave them conflicting structural duties. They're responsible for promoting vaccines and for defending them in the Vaccine Compensation Program. And you also ask them to be responsible for safety. Those conflict. One has overtaken the other. And for the most part, based on our over 2,000 FOIA requests to federal health agencies over the years on behalf of our client, I could tell you, our federal health agencies act like partners with pharma. They encourage their inroads. They act basically in the shoes of pharma because when the immunity to liability was given to the pharmaceutical companies, Congress recognized that apparently and transferred all the safety functions to HHS and the mandate for safer childhood vaccines. And by doing so, it's made them hopelessly conflicted. That was a very, very quick way to try and convey the regulatory and economic framework into which COVID-19 vaccines fell into, and why, from the pharmaceutical and FDA's perspective, the COVID-19 vaccine clinical trials may have been robust, and they were compared to childhood vaccines, but compared to drugs or anybody that actually wants to assess safety, they absolutely were not robust. They were incredibly anemic. And as for post-licensure, regulators didn't do their jobs, but really they acted like pharmaceutical companies seeking to cover up harms and avoid reputational damage and financial liability. I hope this hearing can help.
All right, so in the end, basically says HHS is filled with vaccine insiders. Is that it?
It seems like that's been going on for many years, and I really think that Mr. Siri, he's a brilliant lawyer, and he's just bringing a lot of light to the public. And what's important is that the Advisory Committee for Immunization Practices, they advise the CDC for the schedule, for the immune schedule. And why it's this important? That will not only impact public health in the United States, but virtually most of the countries in the world, they take it at face value, what the CDC says, and then they copy and paste it in their own countries. So can you imagine the level of impact of this decision? So I am very optimistic for the new advisory committee. And I think they will do just great things under the supervision of an amazing secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Here's how I know it's a great idea. The pharmaceutical companies are screaming and yelling about it. They hate it. They're upset that these people were fired. And that's how you know RFK Jr. shaking things up. Dr. Diaz, it's so great to have you on the program. Thank you. And I'm going to tell people more how they can find out about the wellness company. And again, sir, we appreciate you as always.
Thank you so much, Grant.
Absolutely. And good to see you. All right, folks, listen to me. This is the web address for the wellness company. We're grateful for their sponsorship of this program. It's not just the products that they have for you to keep you and your family healthy and safe, but the support of the conservative community and so many of my friends that have podcasts like this and TV shows, and they're on Real America's Voice with me. It allows us to spread this message and move America in the correct direction. So that's why I talk about a parallel economy. And when you do business, you want to do business with companies like the Wellness Company. They're committed to a better America. This is the basic kit, twc.health/grant, twc.health/grant. Use that promo code GRANT for 10% off. And I'm telling you, folks, right now, this parasite cleanse, think about getting it. If you have pets, most likely you have parasites. What do parasites cause? Brain fog, the least, cancer at worst. I think many of the cancers out there are now being caused by parasites. You want to rid your body of parasites, get the parasite cleanse. A TWC doctor will get right in touch with you and talk about whether it's right for you. All you have to do is go fill out the form. twc.health/grant. Use that promo code GRANT for 10% off. And I was looking in the Rumble chat for my friends over at TWC. They said they have a field kit giveaway on the Instagram page this weekend. You give them a follow. They will give away one of those field kits, the ones that I just showed you right here, my favorite kit of all. And that's a great value. So go follow them on Instagram, TWC4, the number 4 health. That's going to do it for us, folks. I will see you on the Real America's Voice show tonight. Stinchfield's Army rolls. Thank you for watching. And hey, happy Father's Day to all you fathers out there this Sunday. I hope you enjoy it. Again, Stinchfield's Army rolls. See you tonight, folks.